congratulations on your ASC award nomination.
Oh, thanks. Bit of a surprise, I have to say. I'm excited about it, and I'm super proud of on behalf of everyone that did the show. But I have to say it was a bit of a surprise.
What does it mean to you to be nominated for the show?
The thing that means the most is that it's a nomination from my peers. I'm on the selection committee as well, and I know the process, and I know that it's a tried and true process, how the nominees get selected, and I'm appreciative of that because it's a really robust process, and it's real, and that's what means most, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's nothing more rewarding than a group of your peers acknowledging what you've worked so hard on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk about the process of making the show. What
Sure.
brought you on to Lost Ollie in the first place?
Um, a good friend of mine, Brent Crowell, who was one of the producers on the show, called and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" We'd worked together on Flash in the past, and he said, I've got a show that's like Toy Story meets Lord of the Rings," I think is what they said, what he said. And I was like, "Toy Story meets Lord of the Rings." And I thought, okay, well, I'm intrigued. Let's see, let's see some scripts. So he sent the scripts over, and as soon as I found out that it was Shannon Tyndall that had created the show, I was a huge fan of Coraline.
Mhm.
Um, and Peter Ramsey directing. I mean, his Into the Spider-Verse is the best Spider-Man movie, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So between those two things and the script being really quirky and really cool and really different, I was hooked. I was in, you know. Um, yeah, and then I had an interview with Peter and with Shannon, and that went really well. And they both knew a designer friend of mine named Stefan Dekant uh, through other means, and Stefan had said, "Oh, you guys have to work together. You'll have a blast." So it all kind of worked out.
Yeah, that's wonderful that it all just kind of came together.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'd love to ask you about the challenges of tackling material like this.
Yeah, well, it was full of challenges. The first, I think, was, and this wasn't so much a challenge as more of a learning curve thing. I think, Peter had always wanted to do live action, and that was something that was very uh, dear to him. And his journey had taken him away from live action. He'd started off in Hollywood, drawing storyboards, I think, and then one thing, he became really, really good at that. He's a great artist, and then that led to animation, and then he was, before he knew it, he was doing, Oscar-winning animation, but he'd never really spent a lot of time doing live action stuff. So working with Peter and developing a working relationship in that regard was the first thing we needed to work out. How to design our shots, how to build it in such a way that was doable in terms of our schedule and that, because we didn't have a lot of time to do the show. Brent, our producer, who got me interested in the first place, bless his heart, said, "Well, in his own mind, we do Flash in 9 days per episode, so we can do this show in 9 days per episode." But this one was a little bit more more challenging. So once we had our sort of workflow between Peter and myself going, then it became how to tell the story with these little puppets. Because in prep, the show was intended to be shot with puppets. Jim Henson's company had built all the little puppets, and they'd ship them up to us. They were amazing, and they couldn't send any puppeteers, so we hired puppeteers from Toronto to come out, and they get to town, and we were talking about shooting camera tests, and obviously we wanted to light the sets and light the puppets and everything. And the puppeteer said, "Well, it takes four of us to operate one of these puppets." Right? We were like, "Whoa, what? It takes four of you?" And it's true. It's, one of them does the head, one does the shoulders, one does the hips, and the other one does the arms.
Mhm.
So we thought, okay, now we really do have to do camera tests. And And we did that, and the upshot of the tests was immediately all of us going, okay, we're not doing this with real puppets. It's just never going to work. Um, so then the focus shifted to how do we afford to do this entirely in visual effects, or to a much greater extent in visual effects. And luckily we had Steph Drury and Hayden Jones at ILM in London on that end of things, who were absolutely amazing. And their entire team fell so much in love with the show that you can see it in every frame of the show. It's just outstanding, the work they did. Anyway, they had just come off of Mandalorian, so they were no strangers to doing really good stuff. So we developed a really good relationship. I would joke around the office that every time Hayden came on, because he was in London, we would get on a Zoom meeting at some weird hour of the night, and he had such a calm presence on the Zoom meetings, and nothing was ever a problem. Everything was. I was joking all through the show. I'm like, Hayden's my set crush, like big time. Every time Hayden says something, I just. So the challenge then became how to tell the story and how to integrate these digital characters in a way that wasn't whimsical and didn't play down the seriousness of their little adventure, because we wanted the emotions that the puppets feel to be, or that the little characters felt to be really real and not dismissed as childish. So we developed a methodology for shooting plates, and what we would do is when we had a scene, for example, of Zozo walking through the pawn shop, we would light the scene as though it was a real movie. Then we would, to the best of our ability, drag Zozo's puppet through the shot so that the ILM guys would have a reference to how the light was behaving on the puppet itself. Okay. And then we would do empty plates and all of that for VFX. The real trick was that we didn't want to just make a series of locked off plate shots, because anybody can do that. We wanted to have real camera moves and real, motivated camera moves and that kind of thing.
Right.
And yeah, so what that meant was we couldn't just invent the shot. We had to let the emotional beats of the scene drive the camera movement. So now we had to add an element of acting each scene out with the puppet.
Yeah.
With full emotional delivery as well, so that it's one thing to wrap around a character with the camera, but you wrap around them differently if they're laughing or if they're pensive or if they're crying. Right. So we needed all the emotional context for each shot. So that became a bit of a challenge, building shots that wrapped around something and then pulled back and then stopped here while they looked at something, and then so we got quite good at that. But it was at first it was like, wow, are we doing this right? Is this, are we going to be able to pull this off? And I remember Peter saying at one point at the end of the day, he was just exhausted, and he's like, wow, he goes, I don't know how you guys make decisions this fast. And because in animation you give your notes and then they animate it, they render it out, you look at it, you have a cup of coffee, you think about it, and then you give them notes, they render it again, you look at it, oh yeah, okay, that looks good. But now we're like in a situation where it's like, hey, you have to decide now.
Yeah.
Are we going to move the camera at this point or that point? What are we pointing at? And he was just like befuddled with like how quickly you have to make decisions on a 8-day schedule with no actors and everything being imaginary.
Right.
So that was the challenge, and then the other thing was, because we were lighting it like a movie, I'd spoken early with Hayden and Steph at ILM and said, look, I really want to be involved in the lighting in your world, the digital world as well. Mm-hmm. Not so much to tell you what to do, but just to chime in from time to time and see how you guys are doing and offer any suggestions.
Right.
And they were so great. They were so excited to hear that.
Oh, good.
And which was great. And but as it turned out, they were so true to what we did on set that I hardly had to give them any notes at all. I would just stare at the renderings just aghast, you know, and
Yeah.
get carried away by the movie. Um, One of the things that we did particularly want to do was avoid the movie looking too polished or the show looking too polished, you know. And we decided early that a way to do that is to introduce some sort of chaos into the frame, some sort of imperfection in every frame that, you know, when you're shooting on a location and you're you know you're running out of time, but you got to do the scene in the dining room, and then the sun comes around, you got this really hot, you know, streak of sunlight that you wish you had time to deal with, but you don't. So we created those sort of accidents
Mhm.
throughout the show. We would add a particularly hot light or blow a background out a little bit hotter than normal, just to create a little bit of, to give the um, plate a bit of life, and then consequently, once they put the animated characters in, to give the animated characters a sense of place and a sense um, of being alive, you know, and not being just animated, perfectly lit characters. I mean, there's scenes in episode one in Zozo's lair, which was entirely animated. We didn't shoot any plates for that at all, where he sits down and he keeps leaning back into this little stray bit of light that hits his cheek
Mhm.
from over here. And they put that in deliberately so that there was something that was like a little bit annoying, but real, you know,
Yeah.
it just made it feel so good, and really wrapped up the whole package, and gave it, you know, that last bit of life that it really needed to, yeah, to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we've spoken previously, you've mentioned like adding something in you know, like dirty it up a little bit, make it more real, not too polished and perfect. And it's just interesting to see how that can, you know, it can go past just people in a shot. There it can be, you know, something that's going to end up with half a CG element in it, and
Yeah,
still the same principles of cinematography and your
yeah.
style can work. Yeah, I mean, what are you most proud of achieving with the show?
Um, I I'm most proud of being able to say that I got to help in delivering Shannon's story the way that he wanted it. The show was very important to him. You know, Shannon grew up in Kentucky, so, and the show was set in Kentucky, and and the accuracy and the nostalgia of that was very important to him. And to be able to harness all these elements, to work with Peter, which I would do again at the drop of a hat, to work with Peter, to work with Shannon, and to really do something different, and really try to drive home uh, those concepts, like adding chaos to things, just to try to bring things to life and seeing them work, um, and then and seeing how our world of physical photography and the visual effects world can coexist so completely like they do in this show. That's super rewarding, and I'm super proud of that. Um, I've had any number of people ask about how we got our stop motion so smooth, and I was like, it's not. This isn't stop motion. It's animated. It's digital, and people are just blown away by it.
Yeah.
Um, so to be able to tell a story, a fully emotional story, I think with this amount of animation was super rewarding. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a fantastic process that everyone was so willing to kind of commit to the vision across the board.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, after doing this, would you do you want to do more animated work?
I do. You know, I've always been interested in it, because you're still telling a visual story, and you're still imparting emotion on the screen and trying to get an audience to buy into it, whether it's animated or live action. So yeah, I'm always excited by animation, and any opportunity to participate in it, I'm all over. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Um, are there any of your fellow nominees, shows or films, just any work from this year that really inspired you creatively that you'd like to give a mention to?
You know what? Everything we're so lucky to be making episodic TV and streaming stuff and movies and stuff right now, because there's such a there's so much competition in the content that the quality level is going through the roof.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by, almost everything that I see. Jeremy's work on Cabinet of Curiosities is, I mean, come on, that stuff looks amazing. I see that stuff and I think, gosh, I don't know how I could even be in the same category as these guys. It's great. And one of the other things is being a part of the ASC and being part of the um, being on awards selection committees and being on the membership committee. You get to see work that normally you maybe wouldn't come across normally. And every time we have a membership interview, I get so swept up in the demo reel segment of it. That more than anything is really inspiring to me, is seeing the breadth and the depth of the people around that are making films and making them their own way. I can't, what's the name of the basketball show?
Winning Time.
Winning Time.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Todd Van Hazel's work on that. Well, all of them. Yeah, everybody that shoots that show. I love it. I love the way it looks. It's so great to see something originating on film, and not just originating on film, but originating on 16, on 8 mil, on Ikegami tube cameras. I remember shooting on those, 40 years ago, and being so frustrated with them all the time because they look like, they look in the show. But to have, I mean, how great for them to be able to play like that, and to have a production and a studio that's willing to back them and say, this is the look of the show. And that it's amazing. Winning Time's an amazing looking show. Everything in the category is
no, there is so much great work. And it is you're well deserved to be in that category. But I understand why you look around and you're like, wow, all of us is super great. But as is what you do, look at that and I'm like, how do you achieve that? It's so seamlessly integrating the real world with this computer generated imagery that also still has such a cinematic look. And that's a really exciting thing to see on TV.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Well, you know what though? Here's another thing that's super that absolutely floored me about Lost Ollie is the scoring and the musical choices. So watch that stuff again with the sound turned off. And it has doesn't have nearly the emotional gravity that it does with the scoring and with the voiceover. It's astonishing how powerful that is.
I'll have to try that. Sound is so important. Yeah, it is so important.
Well, we like to say, oh, in the perfect world, I make a movie, they turn the sound off and people still watch it. It's like, yeah, but sure. But the sound is so important. It's so critical.
Yeah, and that's part of it being a collaborative art. There are multiple important components. It's not just visual, even though we love the visual.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, cool. That's really what I wanted to ask you about. Is there anything else you'd want to add?
No, other than, it's once in a lifetime you get a show that comes along that's that everyone involved in is so in love with. And this is one of those shows, where it's a labor of love on all counts, and it shows. So it's everybody that was involved in it is part of this nomination for sure.